All right, so it's just about 2 minutes past the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started today. Again, welcome to everyone joining this event today. My name is Cole Simcoe. I'm here to just do a quick introduction to the event, Global LEAD Toolkit launch. With that, I'll go ahead and hand things over to Mike McCabe to kick us off today. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks so much, Cole, and thank you to everybody for joining us for today's session on the launch of our Global LEAD Toolkit. USAID, as many of you know, is at a really key moment as we in its approach to development. And as Administrator Power discussed in her speech in November, we need to go beyond just talking about international development and speak more about inclusive development. And a key part of that inclusion at the local or national level is better engaging the 2.4 billion young people ages 10 to 29 as partners in advancing not only our common goals, but the sustainable development goals. And we know the names of lots of inspiring leaders like Greta Thunberg and Malala, but there are so many others that are in rural communities and in barrios of different communities. And we know that while talent is universally distributed around this world, opportunities are not. And so Global LEAD seeks to support all young people in all their diversity and to take their hopes and efforts and through our partnership with USAID, expand them through increased programming around education, civic political engagement, and collective leadership development. And we hope to engage 1 million young changemakers over the next 5 years across all sectors by developing this new partnership with youth that are part of what we call Generation 2030. Because without their support, USAID and others will never be able to meet the sustainable development goals. And without engaging their voices and efforts, we leave out a massive unrealized potential for development. To expand girls' access to education like we're doing in Malawi, or to revitalize democracy, rights, and governance like we're doing in our Unity program with youth in the Ukraine, or improving health systems to combat pandemics like we're doing in Africa with our Dreams ambassadors, and you'll meet one of them in a minute, or combating violent extremism like we're doing through our Ma'an project in Tunisia. So many other ways that young people are truly partnering with us to take the lead on some of these issues at the local level. So Global LEAD's unique framework builds on positive youth development. And I gotta tell you, on the collective wisdom of this field, we've drawn from across the whole field from models of the Parent Family Foundation and IYF and others, and pulled all of these things together out of the experience of a decade of research that we've been doing on youth development. And we've moved from positive youth development to add on, how do we take collective action and move into systemic change by helping our missions, partners, and youth combine different interventions of effective youth engagement to meet technical outcomes in the field. So what does that look like in practice? Well, in North Macedonia, one of our pace setter missions on Global LEAD, the youth ethnic integration activity built social cohesion and reduced barriers to extremism by combining a number of effective youth engagement interventions that you'll find in the toolkit that include advocacy training, civic education in informal and formal settings, youth clubs, new models of youth centers, and project-based or service learning. In Guatemala, another one of our pace setter missions on Global LEAD, the Puentes Project advanced youth employment and reduced the drivers of violence through combining youth engagement interventions such as digital literacy training with strengthening of youth networks, youth leadership networks, strengthening of youth centers, and then providing apprenticeships and scholarship models. So these are just a few of the interventions that you'll find detailed in the resources in the Global LEAD Toolkit. So how do we get there? What are 4 keys to how Global LEAD will advance this vision of partnering with 1 million young changemakers in the next 5 years? First, we're focused on expanding intentional positive youth development programs in all the new designs that are underway with our missions. I have to say, it's really exciting to see the rapid growth in how our missions are intentionally focusing on integrating youth into new multi-sectoral or specific sector activities that are under design. 2, we're building new and strengthened partnerships with youth networks, not only YALI, which is now coming on to its 10th year of engaging young leaders across the African continent, but the European Democracy Youth Network, our Youth Lead Network, which now has 14,000 young changemakers as part of youthlead.org, and our new partnerships with groups like Generation Unlimited and many more. So we're advancing practical evidence-based tools such as this Global LEAD Toolkit, and we're proud to launch that today. And I have to give a big thanks to the people and the collective action that made this possible. Many of you that are on this call, but also Jesse Ellisberg, who designed this and pulled it together, Hillary Taft, the YP2LE team, and so many others. And finally, we want to make sure the fourth component of this is inspiring each other to action through communication campaigns, such as through our Watch Our Impact campaign that got dozens of young people to create videos last year highlighting what they were doing all around the world to bring about changes in the SDGs in their community. And our administrator highlighted that in the International Youth Day celebration for Global LEAD and Watch Our Impact. So this is an inflection point for USAID and quite frankly for the global youth movement. In the coming months, Administrator Power and USAID will launch our new youth policy and implementation guidance. And it's based on a vast input and lessons learned from staff, partners, and young change makers. Our new policy and the Global LEAD Initiative is part of this new partnership between our missions and young people in every country. The principles of the new policy and its key objectives focus on access to skills and opportunities, youth-led collective action and participation, and advancing local system strengthening to really create true inclusive, locally led development where youth in all their diversity share their vision and voices to help us meet these goals. And it's not in a single sector like democracy and governance, it's across all sectors. And this is an opportunity for USAID countries and communities to really meet our priorities in each sector. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing my friend Nuru, who will give us a brief overview of Global LEAD and the toolkit. Hillary will then walk us through some of the sections in more detail. And finally, we'll hear from some young leaders about how they're implementing Global LEAD in their communities in 2 countries of Africa. And finally, you're going to have the chance to get your hands dirty and really get into the toolkit through a fun interactive exercise that we'll have. But first, I want to turn it over to my friend Nuru, who is a creation of a team of young people from Tanzania. Nuru?
All right, welcome back to Youth Focus with Nuru, my new show for youth practitioners and young leaders. I am so excited for an incredible new opportunity for you all. Quite recently, I came across this wonderful initiative called Global LEAD. It is a USAID-led collaborative initiative aiming to mobilize 1 million young leaders to guide their countries with progress on the key challenges of our time. Isn't that exciting? As many know, 2.4 billion young people are both impacted by and can impact issues facing their communities such as climate, health, education, employment, democratic participation, and peace. Here is where it gets even better. The Global LEAD initiative seeks to expand opportunities for millions of young people to take action through education, civic or political engagement, youth leadership, and youth organizing across sectors. Today's young people have so much more to offer, and the Global LEAD initiative supports programs in any context of any sector to build meaningful pathways for young people's involvement. The Global LEAD initiative shows how we can build on the foundation of positive youth development to create more opportunities for young people to participate and lead in civic spaces, take collective action, and change systems. This toolkit provides guidance and practical tools not only to USAID and its partners, but also to young people so that they may create more and better opportunities and activities to strengthen youth engagement. You can click on this link to access the toolkit and understand its importance for programs across sectors. USAID is committed to creating a new partnership and opportunities for and with young people to increase their collective participation and leadership in advancing community development and sustainable development goals. The Global LEAD Toolkit provides youth and youth-focused implementers, illustrates illustrative interventions, indicators for measurement, and creative examples of program activities for setting up and expanding networks across the world, such as Young Africa Leadership Initiative, Dreams Ambassadors addressing HIV/AIDS, intergenerational local councils working for peace, and many more. That makes it easier for all of us to learn from each other and truly partner with young change makers for building better communities and a better world together. I am looking forward to seeing the collective efforts of USAID staff, young people, and associated stakeholders supporting 1 million change makers to make development priorities in their communities and countries. That's it for today. But don't forget to sign up onto youthpower.org to use the Global LEAD Toolkit and be part of an amazing partnership.
So thanks to Nuru, and especially thanks to our colleagues on the youth team in Tanzania who put this video together. I have to say, it shows what young people can do when they bring that innovation and that voice into our development work. And so now I have the pleasure of passing this over to Hillary Taft, our USAID Youth Technical Specialist, who's going to walk us through more of the functionality of the toolkit. Hillary?
Thanks so much, Mike. I appreciate it. Wanted to just dive right in and share a little bit about the actual toolkit. Our producers will share the link in the chat so that you can follow along if you'd like. And we're just going to dive right in. I think some of you may have been a little curious about this program framework that Mike and Nuru shared with you. This is a really great resource, a great visualization of understanding what Global LEAD is all about, showing the outcomes, the different intervention examples, the collective action, all of it in one handy chart. So you can find this by going to the Global LEAD main page under About, scroll down and you'll find the framework. What's really neat about this page of the toolkit is that these intervention examples are actually clickable. They're interactive. So you can click them and learn more about youth advisory councils or peer mobilizers or youth-led research. We'll talk more about those later as well. The way that the toolkit is designed is it's done in a chronological progressive order. So first, we're going to talk about what it means to plan a new youth program. Then we're going to explore different program models. We'll look at different programming by sectors and then how to connect with others. So we're going to get started by looking at how to plan a new program. So if you click this link on the right-hand side, you'll see these different components. Again, they're in kind of progressive order. So thinking about integrating youth voices is the very first thing that we do when we design programs. Then mapping and looking at systems, then designing the actual program, building out that measurement framework, creating a communications plan, and then telling your story. So we're going to look at integrating youth voices here. You'll see all of these areas, these texts that are underlined, all of those are different hyperlinks to resources, tools, program examples. We have videos embedded throughout in case you're more of a visual auditory learner. So one of the things on this page that I wanted to share with you is the YouthPower Youth Engagement Guide. So when we think about integrating youth voices in our program, if you click this link, it's going to take you directly to another resource within YouthPower. So that's really helpful because then you're able to find all kinds of tools on measurement, more resources. So it'll help guide you to navigating the YouthPower site as well. When we go back to the planning a program, we want to think about mapping the context. So we've listened to young people, heard from them what their priorities are. It's important to also map the different areas of prioritization and how young people are interacting and influenced by the systems around them. So one of the tools I wanted to show you here is the USAID Local Systems Framework. We'll be launching a new policy related to this, local development policy later this year in 2022. But if you click this link, it'll open up a new page for you. So you're able to find this entire USAID framework that's been really useful. It's a core part of our PYD trainings and definitely a resource to check out when you're thinking about systems change. Next, we're going to look at designing your program. So we all know this is a very crucial step. We have the visual here of the USAID program cycle. You can find more resources on how to define your problem, logic models, theories of change, etc. You can find more about PYD if that's something that interests you, of making sure that PYD is showing up in your program design. We also have a new section that we're excited about that has how to design programs intentionally for diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion. This is a great new priority for USAID, where we think about not only being the agency for international development, but also the agency for inclusive development. We're going to look now at how to measure. So you've talked with young people, you've mapped out their priorities, you've designed the program. Now we have to think about how we're going to measure these great outcomes that you're going to achieve. So we're looking at all of these, again, are different resources, some of them from Department of State, some of them from USAID. We have great tools on our CLA framework that USAID uses for monitoring and evaluation. The thing I wanted to highlight for each of you are the standard youth indicators. Let me see if I can find these pulled up here. You'll find the standard youth indicators reference sheet hyperlinked there, where it has all of our different indicators and the performance indicator reference sheet. So you can find out details about these indicators for measuring youth outcomes. Next, we're going to look at creating a communications plan. You'll find resources here for how to actually set up a social media toolkit, or create a press kit, or even a communications plan template. Lots of great tools here. And all of this communications work is so that you can tell your story. So wanted to show this last example of Administrator Power on International Youth Day, August of last year. We had amazing young change makers submit the dozens of videos that Mike was talking about earlier, telling their story in a video format of the positive change they're having in their communities. We have additional resources here on the Higher Education Storytelling Toolkit. Is hot off the presses. It's a great resource if you're interested in putting together visual storytelling and other things like that, as well as photo guides. There's some resources here on the ethics and how to record yourself. Really, really great tools. All right, so that's planning the program, but that's not all. We also have adaptable models that are for you to explore. So the adaptable intervention models, these are different program models, approaches that are a part of Global LEAD. And so we want to make sure that whatever model you're looking for really fits your needs. So that's why we've created all of these curated lists and resources. So you'll see that they are sorted by the different stage of the program cycle. So thinking about where you are in programming, as well as the age group of young person that you're wanting to work with, or even the specific sector that you're wanting to target. On the right-hand side of your screen, we're going to click on this Explore All Models. So when you click on this, you'll see, the 26 different intervention models. And I'm just going to highlight 3 so that you can familiarize yourself with how the pages are laid out. The first one I want to share with you is community service, project-based learning, or service learning. So all of the pages start out with a description of what the intervention is, different resources and examples, program examples across different regions that you can click on and read more about, as well as sample indicators that could be used for that type of intervention, as well as a video in case you want to watch a video or share it with someone. This is a really great way to learn more about each intervention. All right, let's go to the local learning exchange. Here's another great one. This highlights some of our work in the E&E region. So this is looking at local learning exchange, bringing different groups of young people together across different ethnic lines or different cultural backgrounds to share with each other. So we have the different program examples, different resources, and of course the indicators again here, as well as a video where you can learn more. Next, wanted to highlight our youth advisory councils as another intervention model. So this summarizes and describes what it means to have a youth advisory council that's working with a program to provide youth input throughout the program, early on, during the design phase, during implementation, and afterwards while it's being evaluated. More resources here, as well as program examples across the different regions. You can find your sample indicators, as well as a video to learn more. All right, so it's a very comprehensive toolkit. So we're going to go back, we're going to look now at programming by sector. So you have all those program models, you've designed your program, but maybe you're wanting to focus on something very specific to a certain sector. So we've put together the sector specific programming page. You'll see on the right-hand side again, all of the different areas where USAID and our partners work. I'm just going to highlight 3 again quickly. We're going to look at agriculture and food security. So I just want to say, these are not lists of everything out there about agriculture. These are especially curated, focused on youth, civic engagement, leadership, and participation. So you'll find here different policies that relate to that from USAID, statistics to help make the case for why a certain sector and youth are an important issue, different best practices, as well as program design resources and ways to get connected, along with more examples from different countries. Wanted to share quickly an example from the education sector as well. Here again, you have the policies and strategies, the statistics, the best practices, program design, curricula that might be relevant, and ways to get connected, along with more program examples. So it's a really great way to learn more about youth in education. Lastly, I'll just share with you a little bit about our health page. Again, amazing policies from our PEPFAR folks, statistics on the importance of engaging young people in health work, best practices and program design, along with examples, of course, from different countries. All right, so now you have a good sense of the overall toolkit. You've been moving progressively from design to telling your story to looking at different models and sectors. The last thing we want to share is how to connect with others. It's so important to find others who are passionate about the same things that you are, and who can support you and help you understand different lessons learned and maybe different funding areas or things like that. So we wanted to show you the communities of practice. So our youth lead and YouthPower colleagues have some great communities of practice that I would recommend you join if you're interested. There's ones on gender, youth engagement, regional ones like the MENA Youth COP. This is a great way to get connected. All right, and that's the toolkit. So with that, you'll have a chance later to dive deeper, as Mike said, to get your hands dirty. But before we get to that, we want to share with you a powerful interview that was conducted by our amazing Global LEAD intern, Manuela, with 2 young leaders from the Africa region working in the health sector. So with that, we'll share with you our panel interview.
Good morning, everyone. We're excited to have credible panelists today representing our Global LEAD projects throughout Africa. With a mission to support a new generation of young leaders, Global LEAD seeks to activate 1 million young change makers like the individuals that we have on our panel today. To this end, we have created the Global LEAD Toolkit, which we will be launching today, a resource guide for youth-focused and youth-inclusive programming. Today, we will be hearing about young leaders who are representatives of USAID activities that highlight Global LEAD's 26 intervention models. We are excited to get to do a deep dive on regional youth leadership in Africa. Today with us, we have Asonele Kutu from South Africa. She is the founder of FemConnect, a startup that creates digital solutions for period poverty support, access to feminine hygiene products, and family planning services. She also served as the Youth Lead Ambassador for South Africa in 2020 and the Youth Lead International Ambassador Advisor to the 2021 Global Changemakers. We have finally Salki, who is 24. She is a Dreams Ambassador in Namibia. She provides information and services on topics related to sexual and reproductive health rights, but also engages on sensitive topics such as gender-based violence and drug abuse communal dialogues. Thank you all so much for joining us today and for sharing your perspectives. Today, we will be starting with Salki. Salki, I'd like to ask you about your experiences and what strategies or tactics you have seen that have worked well to create more civic participation and leadership opportunities for young people in development programs.
The tactics we have a civic education that includes my rights and responsibilities covered in the weekly safe spaces. Through covering these topics, I have observed a drastic change in attitude of young girls and young women. And with girls being more proactive in seeking counseling or help through the difficulties that they are going through, either in their communities or in their relationships, or especially gender-based violence, and then making more informed decisions on sexual reproductive health. This in turn make them educators and mentors in their communities toward other peers. Because before covering these topics, I could have told that they were unaware of their rights and responsibilities. And by being aware of them, they can educate, they can mentor other peers in the communities or in their relationship. And also by mobilizing, by reaching out girls in the community, discussing all the possible information, have also opened their minds. They can discuss their problems with their partners and educate other peers who didn't reach the program yet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Salki, for your perspective. Asanele, on to you. Are there program interventions that you think have been overused, even though they are not effective for young people? Or on the flip side, are there interventions that you think are often overlooked but have real potential?
All right, thanks, Manuela. So I wouldn't say they're mostly not effective, but what I found and what I've seen for a very long time in South Africa is that most youth-based programs have been schools-based initiatives. So they would usually take place within schools as an extramural or as a recreational activity or any other organization that would come into the school, engage with youth. And what we have in South Africa is we have a shortage of community-based centers because there's somehow not many organizations that have community-based youth centers within local communities. And that's why many people target schools. And that somehow became a little bit problematic when we started getting the hard lockdown in 2020, when people couldn't go to schools and we were not allowed to get out. So there was no accessibility to those kind of programs. And those kind of stopped for a year and a half or even 2 years for many. And some programs had to shut down because they couldn't engage with their youth and lack of funding and so forth. And what we saw in between that time and what we used as an area to get in and try to continue our conversations with youth is that we tried to go the digital route. So instead of going to schools, we then invited young people to come and join us on our platform and say, we've got FemConnect ambassadors, and they then become the voice on the ground to say, hey, you can join us. We're meeting at this time. Here's the Zoom link. And some of them joined our WhatsApp groups. So we started going digital in terms of our engagement with young people because we saw that we didn't want that kind of engagement to die off completely and then for them to focus on other stuff. They still needed safe spaces to engage and also places for them to develop. And in addition to that, what we saw is with the period poverty programs, we would usually donate sanitary pads at the schools and the teachers would distribute. But many young girls were then at home, once again, due to COVID, and they couldn't get access because schools were closed. And what we started to do is we created a platform online where girls could say, I need sanitary pads, I'm based in this area. Then we would then distribute based on finding donors through our online platform. So we tried to digitize as much as possible and tried to transition from physical engagement into online engagement. And what we found is that young people were very much receptive and they were open to it, and it was in the comfort of their own homes and it was comfortable. And that is something that we are slowly seeing that is growing. However, the problem with that is that not everybody has access to internet, not everybody has access to a smartphone. So it's still an area that could grow, and there is a little bit of challenges here and there, but it's an avenue that I see growing further and further because everybody is starting to move digital, and some community-based or schools-based programs are closing down right now. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Asanele, for your insight. And finally, we will move on to our very last question. If each of you could please respond with perhaps a sentence or two about what you think working with young partners and young people as partners in development should look like. What needs to change for this to happen? Let's start with Asanele. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
So what that looks like for me is inviting young people to the tables where decisions, strategies, and programs are formulated, and having them being part not just on the implementation side, but also on the formulation of the policies, the projects, the programs, the holistic, thing. So yeah, I think it's not just having a voice at the end and also just evaluating youth-based initiatives at the end, but also having them part of the initial process from start to finish. And that's what being part of, that's what having youth voices, it means to me as a person. Thanks.
Thank you, Asanele. Salki, do you have a thought or two about how you think we should utilize young people as partners in development, and what kind of change needs to happen for us to see this?
Yes, Manuela, I have something. Young people need to be involved in development programs when it comes to decision makings. And then they also need to have a representative sitting on the board and the team involved in this process. And then young people also need to have the right to speak up, and then their decision should be considered and on the issues that they have and how to go about it. And what we need to change is the obstacle or the problems that are hindering, like what is going on really, so that the voice of the young ones is not being considered or they are not being involved in the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Salki, to all of our panelists for attending today. We really appreciate you serving as representatives of these promising interventions, and we encourage everyone to check out our toolkit to learn more about how these interventions and how the models being used as part of them can help include young voices in development. Thank you all.
Wow, thank you so much to Manuela and to our speakers, Salki and Asanele. Thank you so much. It is just really exciting to hear about the work that's taking place already in Namibia and South Africa. Just to highlight a few of the program models that they referenced, they talked about civic education. They talked about peer mobilizing. They talked about youth advisory councils and the importance of having youth voice in programming. They talked about going digital literacy, media literacy, and about the importance of youth centers and safe spaces. So you can learn more about these different types of program models and interventions in the toolkit. We really believe that as you all are out there making change, positive change in your communities, there's so many others we can learn from, the community that we can form to really support each other and maximize those outcomes that we're looking for. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Mike McCabe for our final hands-on section.
Thanks so much, Hillary and Manuela, and to our young change makers. Great to get your perspectives and hear your impact that you're having. So now it's your turn for all of you. The best way to learn and actually utilize this toolkit is to jump in and actually explore it. So we're going to do a 10-minute exercise where we invite you to get into the toolkit, familiarize yourself with it, and Cole's going to walk us through some fun interactive activities in this scavenger hunt that will hopefully give you a better sense of how easy it is to use and how you can find whatever information you're looking for where you are on the program cycle. If you're designing a new activity, if you're implementing one and you want to bring in some new components, or if you're really looking at how do we really learn and build our communication strategy on this. So over to you, Cole and Katie.
Thanks so much, Mike. And again, I am Cole Simcoe for those of you who joined late and have not met me, and I'm super excited to be here with you guys today and help launch this toolkit. So as Mike said, we wanted to get you guys to open up the toolkit and get your hands dirty and kind of feel around to understand what components are included in this toolkit and have a better understanding of how to navigate the toolkit. So what you'll see is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quickly here. Is a couple of things that we're going to do today. So we're actually going to encourage you guys to, first of all, open up the Jamboard that you see on the screen here. So on this Jamboard, we've got a couple of, I should say, 4 different questions that we're kind of asking, or areas that we want you guys to look into for the toolkit. And so I'm going to wait a couple of minutes, and once we put the link in the chat, go ahead and go in there. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to look at those questions at the top of the screen here. You see design, implement, communicate, and network. And I'll read through those in just a second, but we're going to ask you to open up the toolkit and kind of move through the toolkit and see if you can find some examples that you can place on the Jamboard of these different sections and questions. So Gael just went ahead and put the homepage to the toolkit there, and I will go ahead and read through. If you can't access the Jamboard for some reason, if you don't want to put it on the Jamboard, please feel free to, yes, thanks Miriam, put your answers in the chat. But really the point of the exercise here is to make sure that you guys open up the toolkit and start looking for these different sections and these different examples programmatically and through design and those types of things. So if there's too many people in the Jamboard, it's fine. I'm going to keep my screen up for you guys. And you are totally welcome to also put your answers in the chat. But please feel free to open up the toolkit now. And I'll go ahead and read some of these questions, and we'll see what we can get on the Jamboard here. So the first one is really around design. And we're asking for you guys to find an example of designing programs intentionally for diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion. So take a look through the toolkit and see if you can find an area in programmatic design where there's some resources surrounding those focus areas. We also have on the Jamboard implement, so find an intervention model for youth councils and or youth debate and programs. And then next on here we have communicate, find a resource where you can develop and share a story about youth engagement. And then finally we have on here find a youth-led organization working on a topic of interest to you or your organization. So that can be a range of things, whatever is of interest to you or your organization. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes to kind of open up the toolkit, jump in and look for one or all of these different questions that we've brought up here. And like I said, if you can't get into the Jamboard, please feel free to put answers in the chat or things that you just find interesting, questions you may have about the toolkit. Please put them in the chat. We'll have some time to talk about them after the activity. And I do see some answers coming in, which is great.
Nicole, I'm seeing that the Jamboard is, we've got so many people attending today that we've probably over tapped the number for the Jamboard. So you could just do like I did and just put it in the chat there if you have an example you want to highlight.
I like that we overloaded Jamboard. I think that's a great thing.
It's awesome. I'm
putting the toolkit right in the chat for you guys, for those who don't have it there. Yeah, I see some great answers coming through and some links too. And back to some of those resources. So there's really no wrong answers for these. There's a lot of different resources included in each of these sections, so please feel free to just put in what interests you and the first thing you come across.
And again, the goal is to have you right now just take a few minutes to explore it. We know from good professional development and training that, you know, if you create a document and people don't really interact with that document, it's very unlikely they'll go back and open it up. And that's why we want you all to just take 1 minute to kind of go into it. And while you're in that link to the toolkit, you may want to just go to the bookmark, that little star in the upper right corner, and just bookmark it right there. That way you'll know where to find this tomorrow and every day from there. So
that's a good point. Let me see, we've got some things in here. So I want to actually invite Katie on to kind of talk through, I think, some of the answers and how she's come across some of the different resources in the toolkit and ways that she's found them. So Katie, do you want to jump on?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Cole. For those that I don't know, I'm Katie Pons. I'm the Knowledge Management Online Community Manager for YP2LE, and it's just been such an honor to be part of developing this Global LEAD Toolkit. So I'm going to share my screen. Love seeing all of these examples populating on the Jamboard, but just to walk through some of the ways you could get to these answers. So for instance, that first question on design was a little tricky. You won't necessarily see the a header around the DEI, so I wanted to point out how to get there. So from our homepage, which you can go to Plan a New Program, and you'll see on the right side panel are all of our different options that Hillary went over before. If you select Design Your Program, since this question was specifically around design, this is where you can find tons of different information about program design. So we have USAID program cycle here, but if you scroll down, there is a section dedicated to designing programs intentionally for diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion. So I know I saw some of these answers on the Jamboard, including this first one, Youth Rec's Guide on Putting Intersectionality into Practice, as well as the Youth Lead Starter Kit on making programs more accessible for young people with disabilities. So a lot of great resources here, but one of my favorite things about this toolkit is there's so many different ways to access the information you're looking for. So another option here is if you're going to programming by sector, there is a page on over here on gender and inclusion. So here we have additional resources on program examples around gender and inclusion that might be a great answer to that prompt. So the next prompt I wanted to cover was about the intervention model. So there was specifically a question around debate or councils, and there's, again, several ways we can get here. But for that example, maybe you're planning a program and you know that you want to include youth debate and you want examples of how that's been done, indicators, etc. So as Hillary showed us before, if we go to Explore All Models, this will bring us to the full list of intervention models. From here, you can open up any of the pages that you're interested in and find videos, resources, examples. I know I saw the We Act from Cambodia on the Jamboard, as well as those sample indicators that Hillary pointed out before. I did want to point out, though, that maybe alternatively, if you're unsure which intervention model that you want to include in a program, another option is if you select Find a Model that works for you. This brings you to a filterable database of all of our intervention models. So from here, you can filter by program cycle phase, sector, as well as age group, or you can search directly in here. So in the video that we heard before, Asanele pointed out that we need youth involved, not just in the implementation, but throughout the whole program cycle. So here, for example, if you want to think about ways that you could include youth in monitoring and evaluation, you can filter for that. I also saw some questions in the chat about specific sectors. So here's another area where, for example, if you're interested in the environment, you can filter here for that. And this will break down and give you the different intervention models that would be useful for the program cycle stage, sector, or age group that you're looking to work with. So one final thing I'll share, as Mike mentioned, we'd really, really encourage you to star and bookmark this page. We hope that this is a useful resource for you and that going through this activity, you've seen how to navigate this really comprehensive toolkit better, because there's just a lot of different entry points based on wherever you are in your program design. So I want to just thank everyone who's participating and really, really appreciate your involvement today. So I'm going to turn things back over to Mike for our Q&A and next steps.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we've been collecting a number of your comments and questions as we've been going along here. And we want to address some of those right now. But I want to start by asking you to take 30 seconds to think about and put down in the chat one of two things. The one big question I still have is, and put something down, or one suggestion or reaction I have based on what I saw today with the Global LEAD Toolkit is. And just share with us some of those. And we may not get to all of them in the remaining 10 minutes, but we definitely want to find the opportunity to try and address those and hear what your reaction is. We've also gotten some questions about, like, is this like set in stone with the examples that are there? No. If you have great examples that you think fit into this or great resources, the nice thing about an online toolkit is we can continually make it organic and add great new examples. So feel free to share with us if you have any additional resources or tools. The other thing that I want to challenge all of you to do is not only what Katie said of bookmark this today, but put 30 minutes on your calendar in the next week or two. And just like create a slot that says Global LEAD Toolkit, 30 minutes. And take 30 minutes to just explore and go into the different sections, looking for some of the things that you're looking for as you're either designing a new activity or related to your current activity, or thinking about how you want to measure or learn from activities. And explore and then share that out with some of your colleagues, because that's the only way, you know, in the development field, we can create lots of things. But if we don't create that opportunity to like get hands-on, open it up, practice it, and then share it with others, it doesn't meet its potential. And that is what we really want, is to take all these great examples. I mean, this is a toolkit of collective impact. It has so many examples from all of you in the field, but now it's like, how do we make it practical for you to think about how you want to use it? So let's look at some of the questions that you all have. Hillary or others, feel free to jump in and answer some of them. I know that I saw, for example, one question in here that was asking a little bit about, does it have examples on how to do distance or mobile learning during the pandemic, and looking at education examples. And there are a number of examples related to education here that you might want to explore. I think there are some other ones that we could be adding in that area, particular to looking at education in pandemic situations. Some of the work of, for example, Educate out of Uganda is really fascinating, how they've engaged youth on this. So let's look at a couple of the other examples that are out there. We have, I'm not familiar with this platform. Whoop, I lost that one. But I really need to try whatever it will take to be best among many. I'm looking at this as bridge to USA and to access to education and living. Thanks for sharing that. Thanks also to Natalie's comment on the great resource, well organized. I look forward to opportunities to sharing. Let's look at what questions do you have, or what suggestions do you have as well? So
I was going to bring up one question, Mike, that I thought was
Definitely.
interesting, that came up earlier, which was a question surrounding resources in the toolkit for engaging with higher education institutions, and how that's linked into the toolkit.
Yeah, and so if you go into what I just dropped in a little bit before on the designing a program and by sector in the education sector, you can find some really interesting examples there. And there are in other sections as well, different higher ed examples. And again, if you know of other ones that are missing, like some of our work with career centers, when you go into that intervention, you can find some really interesting examples of how young people are leading in Morocco or in other countries around development of career centers at higher ed institutions. Other questions, or Hillary, jump in as you see some of these as well. Question from Marjorie about how can programs add their resources to this? So we will drop in our emails, and you're welcome to submit through this. You can send some of these and we could work to get those up. I think Hisham had a number of interesting comments as well, both in terms of like, what do we have in terms of accessibility for youth at different ages and young change makers? And we've been engaging the Youth Lead Network, which includes young people across different stratas of age in some of their comments and ideas. We also, on the language component, as I said at the beginning, if you go into that upper left corner, you're able to flip this into multiple languages. Now, not every resource will transfer over because some of them are hard-coded in English, but we're going to continue to work to make sure that this platform has the content, especially the most important content, in multiple languages for you. So you can see here where we're flipping it into French or into Spanish, and how that allows you then to share this in different ways. So, and we look forward to partnering with any and all of you who want to work through your organizations to share this presentation out. Like, we can do presentations to your networks on this, on how to use it, or on how we can build out more of the resources to be practical for your team. Other questions that folks are seeing, I'm kind of scanning down through this. We have about 4 or 5 more minutes. We'd welcome your comments as well as questions. So,
Mike, Amy had an interesting question, Amy Acello, about how we can create systems that integrate this useful and robust tool into busy development missions slash implementers' current design activities. Possibly, she said, possibly mandating its use, but I think the question is more about how do we really apply some of the lessons in here, such a busy system that we're already working in.
Yeah, you know, that's a great question, Cole. As I said at the beginning, USAID will roll out in the next couple of months our new youth and development policy. And accompanying that will be our implementation guidance. When we did our first policy in 2012, it didn't have implementation guidance. This one does. And in that implementation guidance, it talks about utilizing program guidance like the Global LEAD Toolkit, leveraging things like the youthlead.org platform, which is a platform by and for young change makers, using the youth programming assessment tool, which is a great self-assessment tool for any and all organizations, donors, youth-led community organizations, implementing partners. And these really will allow us, as we design, this year alone, I think our missions have said they'll be working on developing 31 new youth-related program activities around the world. So we're hoping that this really is a useful tool as USAID staff design new programs for effective youth engagement with these interventions, as implementing partners design their responses to that, and most importantly, as young change makers play a bigger role in co-creation with us in a lot of these activities. All right, we've got about 3 more minutes. We welcome any other recommendations or questions folks have. There's a question about language accessibility. I think we've been trying to address that and really looking at, how we can get better content on there from multiple countries. And Daniel, thank you for your comment about making sure, especially in Spanish for Colombia. About registration, please feel free to register on the youthpower.org platform. It takes at maximum 15 minutes. I would say it takes a lot less than that. But you know, if you're registered on it, it allows you to get into all of those communities of practice that Hillary showed.
We did have one more question, and this would possibly be a link to share. People were asking about the toolkit offline, so the PDF version of the toolkit, understanding that's a little more static, but helpful to some people who cannot access all of this information.
Yeah, so and Gael, if you could help us and drop in the PDF version of this, because we recognize that, you know, sometimes it's hard to access all of this online. So we have created a PDF version that accompanies this, but we like having the interactive online toolkit because it allows you to, like, literally, as Hillary showed, when you go to that framework on the one of the front pages, you can actually mouse over all the interventions and hyperlink right into those. So that's kind of a fun feature of it. And Sasina, you're asking, whoops, just lost that one. Let's see, Sasina, I'd like to know how much of the civic political engagement level includes accountability mechanisms. That's a great question. So, you know, the work of Accountability Lab and of some of our other partners is definitely highlighted in some of the examples. So if you go down in either through the thematic area sectors on DRG, or you go in through the interventions and look at some of those components, you'll find that. But Sasina, if you see good examples that are out there that we haven't put, you know, there are some really good other examples that we'd be glad to add up into that. As we kind of move into the last 2 minutes, I really want to reemphasize two things. Tons of effort have gone into this from implementing partners, from young leaders, from USAID staff. And I want to thank all of those people who were part of that. So Jesse, again, who was the main architect behind this, and Hillary, Manuela, Robert, Hanya, Daria, from our VSFS intern team, Katie and Cole, and the YP2LE team. But all of this means nothing if we don't look at the ways to, like, get people to open this up and explore it. So again, take 30 minutes if you can, share it with your teams, give us your feedback, send us new things, bookmark it so you know exactly where to find it, and be partners with us on this. It's an exciting year ahead. As we launch the policy and this Global LEAD Toolkit, as we launch a number of different tools and resources and guidance, this isn't about launching tools. This is about launching a partnership to work together with young leaders to really meet those SDGs and the 2030 goals. And so we look forward to how we walk this walk together with all of you. And thank you to everyone who took the time to be part of this today. Thanks again.